But the title of the message tonight is Light of Mine. Anybody ever heard that cheesy little kid song, This Little Light of Mine? This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. This little light of mine. Sing it like I mean it. I just got convicted right there. Goodness gracious. If you didn't grow up in church, just forget all of what just happened, right? That was a little weird, but it's okay. But tonight, the whole title of the message and all of what Paul talks about in chapter 5 is all about the light that Jesus brings us. And so I'm going to jump right in tonight. We're going to be in verses 8 through 16. Okay, so I'm going to read it all, and then we're going to pick it apart together. Verse 8 says this: For you were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Live as children of light, for the fruit of light consists in all goodness, righteousness, and truth. And find out what pleases the Lord. Have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. It is shameful even to mention what the disobedient do in secret. But everything exposed by the light becomes visible, and everything that is illuminated becomes a light. This is why it is said, Wake up, sleeper, rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. So I'm going to kind of break this apart into 3 different sections. So the first thing that we're talking about tonight is just talking about this idea that we are given a light that we are to walk in, right? It's a light that we walk in, right? He says that we were once darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. Live as children of light. And then he says, for the fruit of light consists in all goodness, righteousness, and truth. And find out what pleases the Lord. Have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. And then skip ahead to verse 13. He says, but everything exposed by the light becomes visible, and everything that is illuminated becomes a light. And so I think when we dive into this passage, what Paul is doing here is he is automatically starting with that you were once darkness. So if you remember, about 3 weeks ago, we jumped into Ephesians chapter 2, where we talked about how we were dead in our trespasses and sins, right? And so he's going back to hammer this once again, right? That we are in darkness. That without Jesus, we are separated from the light. We do not have light, right? But now he is saying that you are the light in the Lord, right? So because of what Jesus has done for you and me, we're no longer in darkness, but we have been brought into the light. And basically what he's doing is he is reminding those who are saved to live like they're saved. Right? He says, live as children of light. And everything that is illuminated becomes a light. And so what is he saying here? He's saying that when you were in darkness, you were allowed to live in darkness. But now that you are in the light, you are to live as children of the light. And so then he says, have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness. Right? And so when I was thinking about this passage, I ultimately just asked myself this question. This is kind of a difficult thing for Paul to ask us, right? That we were dead in our trespasses and sins. I don't know about you, but if I think about my own life and my personality and just what my bend is towards, it's a lot easier for me to walk in darkness than walk in light. Right? It's a lot easier for me to take the easy way out. It's a lot easier for me to run towards the darkness, the things that God would not want me to do, the things that God would not necessarily approve of that I want to do. It's a lot easier for me to do those than it is to walk in light. And so I think sometimes when I would just kind of grow up and I would hear sermons like this, I would think about okay, have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness. I'm going to hear a sermon about all the ways that I am walking in darkness and all the things that I've got to do better. And so I would even, in my own head, begin to make checklists of what I've got to stop doing. Right? Okay, well, I'm walking in darkness in this area, so I got to stop doing that. I got to stop doing this. I got to stop doing that. And I just want to just stop for a moment and just say that if that's your brain already, have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, and you're already running in that direction, that is not the type of sermon that we're going to have tonight. It's not going to be this, hey, you're in darkness, get yourself out of darkness, be a better person, do all these things, because I don't believe that that's what Paul is saying here. Paul is not saying that you were in darkness, and so now you've got to find your way towards light. What he is saying is that we've been given light, and because of that light, we should not walk in darkness. Because of how great that light is, darkness is no longer appealing to us. And so the question is, how do we walk in light? Like, what does it look like for you and for me as Christian believers to walk in light? And so I started thinking about this and trying to figure out just kind of what this walking in light looks like. And it led me to two different passages of Scripture. If you've got a Bible, you can turn there. They'll also be on the screens. The first one is 1 John 1:5. It says, "This is the message we have heard from him and declared to you. God is light. In him there is no darkness at all. If we claim to have fellowship with him and yet walk in darkness, we lie and do not live out the truth. But if we walk in the light, as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus, his Son, purifies us from all sin." And the next one is John chapter 8, verse 12. When Jesus literally speaks, he says, when Jesus spoke again to his people, he said, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." What is this saying here? This is saying that Jesus is the light in which we are to walk in. Right? That Jesus came, lived a sinless life, and died on the cross to be the light of the world for you and for me. And so when he encourages us to live as children of light, ultimately what he is saying is he's saying you need to be children who run after Jesus, have this deep fellowship with Jesus, so much so that it changes the way that you live your life. And so that darkness no longer is something that is appealing to you because you have this fellowship with Jesus who's changed your life. And so I think sometimes we can read passages of Scripture like this and we can jump into the legalistic things of like, I got to make sure I don't do this, make sure I don't do this, make sure I don't do this. And ultimately what Paul is saying here is when you are called to be a child of light, you are called to be a child of King Jesus. And if you are a child of King Jesus who is walking in deep fellowship with him, loving him, spending time in his word, spending time with him, ultimately, those things are going to be seen as less valuable. Paul is ultimately pointing out that fellowship with Jesus allows us to walk in light. And when we walk in light, we cannot settle for darkness. And so I don't know about you, but some of you probably in this room, you've been claiming to have a relationship with Jesus. You've been claiming to walk with Jesus, but your life is very much defined by darkness. And I would not say that you need to make sure that you get all those lists of dark things out of your life and make sure that you stop watching those shows and stop doing those things. Your priority is not to stop a bunch of things. Your priority is to start spending and developing your time with the Lord. He will take care of that for you. People who live as children of light will not settle for darkness. You know, if you just make it, honestly, just take it out of the Bible for a second and you just think about the difference between darkness and light, it makes sense that light is better than darkness, right? If you were to hop into an Uber and the guy was like, "Hey, I'm going to put a blindfold on and just see how this goes." Oh, everybody would just be like, no, I'm not going to let you do that. You know, if a surgeon was like, "Hey, I know you're having open heart surgery tomorrow. I've been trying out this new thing where I cut off all the lights in the hospital and then just see how it goes." Nobody's going to be down for that, right? And I tell you why? Because it's dangerous, right? There's no life in that. You would never allow a surgeon to operate on you in the dark. You would never allow someone who's driving you somewhere to drive blindfolded. Why? Because there's no life in that. It's dangerous. It's putting you right in front of the death is on your doorstep in that scenario. And the crazy thing about Christianity is that death was on our doorstep. We were dead in our trespasses and sins. And God brought us out of darkness and into light so that we could fellowship with him. And so now we have the opportunity to live a life that we would not have lived on our own. And now we have an opportunity to run towards light each and every day, even when darkness is trying to pull us each and every day back towards who we used to be. And guys, the reality for you, what it looks like for you to find life in Jesus, is have such a deep, abiding fellowship with him that the light of the world is constantly on your heart, constantly on your soul, constantly on your mind, and you cannot help but be a child of light. I think sometimes we think that Christianity is so much more like, I walked that aisle and I prayed that prayer and I did that thing, and now I'm just living how I want to live. And I would just say that if that is you in this room, I want to lovingly share with you, Jesus did not save you so that you can stay in darkness. He saved you to give you life and to make you a child of light. This is a light that we are called to walk in. He even goes into verse 10. He says, the fruit of light consists in all goodness, righteousness, and truth. In verse 10, he says, and find out what pleases the Lord. All right, some of you probably read that and you're like, well, how do I do that? Man, if I knew how to please the Lord, I would just do that. Just tell me what you want to do. I mean, when Kelsey and I first got married, the first year of marriage is the best year of marriage. And every year is great because, Kelsey, I know you're watching this and I love you. But the first year of marriage, there was a lot of things where we would get into arguments. She hated how I was loading the dishwasher, or maybe she didn't like how I was taking care of the dog because we had these expectations and all that different stuff going into marriage, right? And I literally, every argument we would ever get into, I would just say, just tell me what you want me to do. Just give me a list of things and I'll just do all that stuff. Because then I won't make you mad. I'll do what I got to do and then you can be happy. Let's just do that, right? But now, after 5 years of marriage, and we've known each other, spent a lot of time together, I know a lot more than I did September 6, 2014 than I do right now. Right? I know a lot more now than I did then. Why? Because I have spent time with her. I've woken up every day in the same house with her. We've eaten meals together. We've done life together. And so now I know how to please her. I know how she likes the dishwasher loaded. And I know the ways that she thinks, some of the things that she has around the house or what she wants to do. I know because I've been 5 years in. I'm more experienced. And the cool thing about verse 10 here that Paul is saying is that when you walk as a child of light, you then know and grow in what it looks like to know what pleases the Lord. So this is a miraculous truth that Paul is writing here. Think about it for a second. You were once darkness. You were once dead in your trespasses and sins. And now you have the opportunity to not only be a child of light, but know what pleases God, and you are able to do it. Guys, that is a motivation for you and for me to walk in light. When we walk in light, we will stop settling for darkness. So, it's the first thing. We have a light that we can walk in. Number 2 is a light that we're given, right? So if you look at verse 14, he gets through talking about being a child of light. He gets through talking about all these things. And then he says, this is why it is said, wake up, sleeper, rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. So what Paul is doing here is he is quoting Isaiah chapter 60. So if you got a Bible, you can turn there. If you don't, I'll kind of read some parts of it. I'm not going to read all of it. But what he is doing is he is quoting Isaiah chapter 60 in this passage. And in this time, when Isaiah is writing, he's writing about the nation of Israel. And the nation of Israel has been in darkness. Nobody has heard from the Lord for a very long time. God has abandoned them. Right? God has completely cut them off. And in chapter 59, Isaiah writes talking about the nation of Israel, and he says, surely the arm of the Lord is not too short to save, nor his ear too dull to hear. What is he saying there? He's saying, God, surely God's arms are not too short to save us out of this situation. Surely his ears are not too dull to hear the cries of desperation that we have to get us out of this mess that we're in. The nation was in unparalleled darkness. It was completely cut off from fellowship with God. They had sinned gravely. They had totally screwed up their relationship with God. And now they get to Isaiah chapter 60, where Isaiah is giving them the greatest news that this nation has ever heard. Because in Isaiah 60 verse 1, he says, arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises upon you. See, darkness covers the earth, and thick darkness over the peoples, but the Lord rises upon you, and his glory appears over you. So why would Paul point back in Ephesians chapter 5 to what happened to the nation of Israel in Isaiah 60? Because what he says, this is why it is said. So he says, live as children of light. Don't walk in darkness. Have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness. And he says, that is why it said, wake up, sleeper, rise from the dead, for Christ will shine on you. What Paul is doing in this passage of Scripture is he is reminding them that their Redeemer, God, brings light. He said, remember God who brought the Israelites out of this struggle, out of this pain, and gave them the promise of the light abiding with them? Remember that? This promise is still true. Right? That God has not abandoned His children. That we can be children of light. That we can step out of darkness. He's reminding them by hey, flip back to Isaiah chapter 60. God promised the Israelites that God would shine on them. No matter how bad they had been, no matter how rough they had it in Isaiah 59, Isaiah 60 verse 1 says, wake up, O sleeper, rise from the dead, for Christ will shine on you. What does that mean? That means, guys, that no matter how much darkness you find yourself in, you serve a Redeemer who wants to bring you to light. No matter how grim your situation may be, you serve a God of light. So not only is it a light that we can walk in, it's a light that we are given. It's a light that we are given, not that we earn. And again, when we hear sermons like this where it talks about being children of light and having nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, often my inclination, and I'm assuming some of you probably feel the same way, is, all right, I got to make sure that I get my life together. I got to get my crap together because I've been doing way too much bad stuff. And the reminder here was not that the nation of Israel had pulled themselves up by their bootstraps to be a good nation. The reminder here was God in His sovereignty and His goodness gave good gifts to His children and brought them light even when they did not deserve it. And I think somebody in this room needs to hear that tonight. That no matter how dark your life may be, no matter how many mistakes you feel like you made, God has given us light to remove us from darkness. And it never had anything to do with what you and I did. He's a good God who gives good gifts to His children. You know, I don't know if you can tell by how much I'm sweating. I'm a little sick. I'm a little under the weather. And so my wife hasn't been letting me, pick up my daughter or, spend any time with her. And so it's really funny because my daughter will be, in the living room, and I'll just, go into my bedroom and close the door. And anytime Layla is same thing that she does with Kelsey, anytime that she wants to be with Kelsey or I, and we close the door because we don't want her to get into the garage or whatever else, she just starts slamming her hands and her feet on the ground, right? And she begins to cry because in her 14-month-old mind, she does not understand that a closed door does not mean that we're gone forever, right? All of us, if you see me leave a room, you're going to assume that I'm going to come back soon. I don't think that Layla's mind is fully developed to the point where she can understand the fact that when she doesn't see us anymore, that there's probably a good chance that we're going to come back. And so what does she do? She cries because she's broken over the fact that she's no longer with her mom and dad. And she feels alone. And she's scared. And I think the reality for some of us in this room today is that you are the same. That in your darkness and in your mistakes, you see only closed doors. You do not see a good father. You see shame, and you see guilt, and you see regret. And you do not feel like light is even possible. And I'm here to tell you today that this light that Paul is referring to is a light that we were given. And just like Layla, the Father always comes back. The door is not always closed. There's a returning of light for those who want to live as children of light. So first, it's a light that we walk in. Second, it's a light that we're given. Thirdly, it's a light that we use. It's a light that we use. Look at verses 15 and 16. He says, "Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil." What Paul is doing here is he's kind of giving a final charge. He's kind of giving a final motivation. And he's ultimately saying, he says a few things. Basically, he reminds them that life is short. He says, be careful then how you live. Be careful how you live, not as unwise, but as wise. I think what this is communicating to me is that when we walk in light, that takes intentionality. That takes wisdom. It takes us being careful how we live our lives. But then he also says, make the most of every opportunity because these days are evil. And I love what Paul's perspective is here, right? Because he doesn't say, hey, because the days are filled with darkness, why don't we all just sit around and complain about how dark the days are? Right? He doesn't just say, oh, well, you know what? Because we're children of light, why don't we just huddle up together and just pray that we don't get the sin bug? What does he say? He says, make the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. And I think the thing that's happening in the church today that kind of scares me is that we gather together and we like to talk about how evil the world is. We like to talk about how dark the world is. How much we're forgetting God and how much the world just is forgetting God every single day. And it's just really tough to be a Christian nowadays. And so we focus on because the days are evil, but no, we don't always talk about making the most of every opportunity. Because here's the reality. God has given us a light to walk in. He's given us this light that He's a Redeemer that gives us light, gives us the ability to walk in light. But it's also a light that we are called to use. Right? That when we make the most of every opportunity, Matthew chapter 5:16 says, let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. Which means that being a light bearer, being a child of a light is not just having nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but also shining bright so that people can see what you have. People can understand what it looks like to be a believer by the way that you live your life. People can see the fact that you are finding life in Jesus, and through the way that you live your life, you are bringing life to others. I love what Brennan said from the Baptist because it's so true. My prayer for C3 is that there would be more people coming to faith in Christ in dorm rooms and coffee shops and on campus, just at our tent or whatever it may be, because people are living their lives walking in light and making the most of every opportunity. As Christians who want to be children of light, who walk in light, who've been given light that we did not deserve, we also have a call in our lives to steward that light well. We also have a call in our life to make the most of every opportunity. A few things that I know about light is that there's a distinct difference between light and darkness. Right? There's a distinct difference between light and darkness. Anybody here scared of the dark? Okay, this is about to get weird for you then. Can we cut the lights? Can we do that? Can we cut these? All right. So this is just one light, right? That there's a distinct difference that even just the people right here, right? The people right here, you see this light. There's a distinct difference between darkness and light. People on the front row, can you get your phones out for me? Can you get your phones out for me? And just turn on your flashlight? It's a little bit different, right? A little bit different, right? What about the first row of the back sections? First row of the back sections. Can y'all cut your flashlights on for me? All right, if you think you're in the very back row, I want you to turn your lights on. If you're a small group leader in the room, why don't you cut your cell phone light on? So here's what's just happened. Now, pretty much all of y'all can see me. I want everybody pull your phone out. Everybody pull your phone out and turn your flashlight on. All right. Now listen up, listen up. What has just happened is that every single light in this room is lit, right? Lit. I didn't think that'd be the best joke to land tonight, and I'm kind of depressed that it did, but it's all good. We're going to roll with it. I asked you guys to do this for the sake of this illustration. A lot of people would say that the days are evil in the lives of college students. A lot of people would say that your generation is walking in darkness. A lot of people would say that your generation cannot walk in light. And you know, we started with just my cell phone light, right? Just one person making the most of every opportunity. And that drastically changed the way that darkness was seen in this room. And then we added the front row. And the front row was probably just like, 10, 15 more people. So then 16 people out of the however many people are in this room decided to make the most of every opportunity, decided to live as a child of light, drastically affect darkness. And then all of C3 cuts their flashlights on. And all of a sudden, darkness is no longer anything that can be said of this room. Because there is light throughout. There's a distinct difference between darkness and light. And when people walk in light, darkness cannot help but hide. And so I say that for a few reasons. Number one, I say that because we have a great opportunity to make the most of C3. Can you imagine what it would look like if each one of us decided to make the most of every opportunity and have this light that we use? Like, imagine if that happened. Imagine that this illustration became a reality for how you walk with Jesus. That just like this flashlight that all of you can clearly see, everyone in your friend groups and spheres of influence could see clearly the fact that you walk in light. Could see clearly that Jesus, the light of the world, has drastically affected your life. And imagine if your friend and the next friend and the next friend and the next friend decided to make the most of every opportunity as well. You guys can bring the lights back up. See if I can figure out how to turn my flashlight off. Guys, I gave you that illustration to say that we have a great opportunity in front of us. But I want to close with just this idea that there's a distinct difference between darkness and light. There's a light that we've been called to walk in. But we have Jesus who wants to have fellowship with us. Just like we talked about last week, He wants to dwell in our hearts. That we can have fellowship with this light, be children of light who know what God wants for our lives and walk in that. That is possible for each one of us. That we serve a Redeemer who, no matter how dark our lives have gotten, He always comes back. And He always brings light. And lastly, it's a light that we use. And one thing that I wholeheartedly believe about this room is that we could see God do something that we've never seen before through us being children of light. It's just our call to make the most of every opportunity. And I can't help but think about that there are some of you in here, in this room, right now, who would say, if you're honest with yourself, you're in this room because you hope that this would make you a better person, or you have friends that are here tonight. But if you're honest with yourself, walking in light is not something that you do. That Jesus may bring light, but light is not something that is in your life. And you would probably tell yourself that you're a good person. You would probably tell yourself that you are doing good things. But at the end of the day, when you really evaluate your life, you know that you've never truly given your life to Jesus. And so we haven't really done like an invitation this semester, and tonight's going to be the first time that we do it. And the only thing that I'm going to ask you to do is there are cards on the front of every chair in front of you. Just a little communication card that you can check that you've given your life to Jesus. You can put some information on there. So here in just a moment, I'm going to lead you just through a time of decision. And if that's you in this room, and you would say, Luke, I've been walking in darkness for too long, and tonight I realized that I've never truly walked in light. I've been in church a lot. I've been doing a lot of good things by the world's standards, but I've never truly given my life to Jesus. Maybe some of you are walking in darkness that is unexplainable. Maybe you are walking in a season of life that you have nowhere to turn. And I would just tell you that the best place that you can turn is turn your eyes on Jesus. Because when you do that, God will make you a child of light. And He will show you His purpose and His plan for your life. The thing we say all the time here at C3 is that we want people to find life in Jesus so that they can bring life to others. Maybe you're sitting here and you're like, man, I like that light illustration. I want to go do something. I hope that's the case, but God's got to have to do something in your own heart before that can happen. So I'm going to do this. If you could just bow your heads and close your eyes with me. And I'm just going to ask this question. If that's you in this room, you say, Luke, I've never given my life to Jesus. I've never truly stepped out of darkness and into light because I've never actually had a relationship with Him. If that's you in this room today, I just want you to look up at me. And just make sure that I see your eyes. Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? Don't let me miss you. If that's you in this room, you just looked at me, maybe you didn't, maybe you were too shy or nervous, we're going to ask you to fill out that card. All that is we want you to put your name, some personal information, preferably your cell phone number. And on that card, I just want you to check the box that says, I want to talk to somebody about my relationship with Jesus, or I've given my life to Jesus today. And then on your way out, there's going to be buckets. And on those buckets, you can just drop that card in there on your way out, and one of our staff will reach out to you. I would just encourage you, don't leave today without doing business with God. Don't leave today without being a child of light. Because God has so much planned for you. Too much planned for you to be settling for darkness. As everybody still has their heads bowed and their eyes closed, I just want to encourage you, C3. I don't know where your heart's at right now. I don't know what you're walking in. But here in just a moment, we're going to sing Nothing Else. And you've probably heard us sing that song before, but the main theme of that song is that we will settle for nothing less than Jesus. But there's nothing greater than walking in light. There is nothing greater than being who Jesus has called us to be and finding life in Him. And And so maybe we sing, maybe you need to come to the front and just get on your knees. Maybe you need to grab a hand of a staff member somewhere in the room and just begin to talk with them, because maybe for the first time in a long time, God is calling you to dream what it would look like for you to make the most of every opportunity. C3, our task is too large for us to settle for darkness. So let's be children of light. Let's walk in it. And let's use it. God, we love you. We thank you so much for who you are and for what you do. God, I just pray over this room right now for every person here. Lord, I pray that you would lead us to walk in light, that we would be people who run fully after you with everything that we have and make the most of every opportunity. We ask all this in your name. Amen.